So good morning, everybody. On this beautiful, cold Sunday, the end of February. If you can't hear me, please let me know. So this is our last in the series, Buddhism in a Nutshell. And I'm going to be giving a short recap of what we've done so far, and then focus primarily on the last of the two of the Four Noble Truths. So I actually didn't make it to DNKL, even though I promised I would, but at least we have the beautiful altar here in the on the screen, so you can pretend that you're there. We can all pretend that we're there. So we'll start by just relaxing into the present moment, taking a minute to reattach our minds to our bodies. Take a few breaths. Relaxing into the safety and ease of the present moment. And then setting our motivation for reflecting on the Dharma. Let's think that how wonderful to have this opportunity, to have all the causes and conditions necessary to be able to study the Dharma and to use this in order to make real changes in our lives, so that we can be happier. And by doing so, we can share what we've learned. We can set a good example. We can radiate the peace in our families and our friendships and all of the relationships that we participate in. Okay. All right, so we have been examining Buddha's teachings, and this is the best medicine, right? So many of you have heard the analogy of how the Buddha is compared to a physician, right? So the Buddha is a 5-star physician, and the best medicine that he offers us are his teachings, right? That's the Dharma, the teachings of the Buddha. And the Sangha, the community of like-minded practitioners, those on the path, those are like the nurses, always here to support us. So everybody who's here, together today, we're all like Sangha, right? We're all supporting each other. And so what does the Buddha, teach us? The Buddha teaches us the causes of suffering. But the causes of suffering are primarily karma and the negative emotions that stem from overpowering ignorance, right? And so that's really, really important. We think that everybody, desires happiness, and yet we're so overpowered by this very, very thick, impenetrable, seemingly impenetrable ignorance that we are unable to make, sound judgments, right? So an ordinary illness like COVID can end this life, but the mental afflictions, they're much more powerful because they affect not just, this life, causing us suffering in this life, but future lives, right? Future lives, plural, right? So that's what we really need to focus on. And it's the ignorance that compels us to take birth over and over and over again, right? Here we are cycling in suffering, cycling in samsara. So our very nature is being attached to things of the present and then grasping at things of the future, right? And that's what propels us. It's that karmic, that habit that propels us over and over again. So based on this ignorance, then, all different kinds of sicknesses arise. And one way of thinking about the sickness, right, is it's this very attachment, the attachment for all of the shiny, dazzly, razzly things for fake happiness, right, a fake happiness. And that's what drives us to death and potentially lower rebirths, in the future, because we are likely to commit non-virtuous actions that then propel us to the lower realms. We talked about the 3 different kinds of suffering: suffering of change, a suffering of suffering, pervasive suffering, and how all of those very subtle and not so subtle, gross and subtle impermanence, how all of that underlies our lives all the way from our birth to sickness to old age and death. So, we look at the suffering, looking at it straight in the eye, right? And all of its various disguises, that gives rise to fear. And so we train not to be overwhelmed by, like a debilitating sense of fear, right? That causes us to just freeze and, an absolute type of paralysis, which is a natural reaction, right? But instead, we're training ourselves to be able to use, like a healthy, actionable fear. And it's that type of fear that is necessary, right? Because fear causes renunciation. It causes us to make changes. It causes us to want to be free from this state of suffering, right? If we're in a fear-free situation, very stressless situation, then we're not going to have that impetus, that motivation to drive us out of samsara and towards enlightenment. So who do we turn to for protection, right? How do we find the door that gets us out of here? So ordinarily, our families are the source of our refuge. When we are reborn, into the world, then we come completely alone. We're totally vulnerable, totally dependent for our survival, our very survival, on our parents, who have the responsibility of providing a home that's safe and loving. It's a place where we can grow into adulthood by venturing out to try new things, exploring, going on adventures, but always thinking that, we have a safe place to return to. Likewise, when we're traveling abroad, when we go to many new places, maybe to a new country, right? The feeling of having a home that's safe and warm and cozy, where you can let down your guard, not worried about being robbed or anything. That feeling of having a home base, is very powerful. It's always kind of in the back of your mind, right? But the point is that at the end of this life's journey, right, we're going to have to move on empty-handed to our next life. We have to leave behind our home, our friends, our relatives. Everybody has to be left behind. And the only thing that continues to the next life, are the imprints, the karmic imprints on our most subtle mental continuum. And so we need to keep, these relationships in mind from that very perspective, with remembering over and over again, that they are impermanent. that we're going to have to, give up friends and family. So this triple jewel, right? Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, these are the causal refuge. These are the causal refuge because they provide us protection from all fear, the temporary dangers, like the thieves, illnesses, poverty, wildfires, as well as the fear of nirvana's peace. So they eliminate fear for this life or next life. And the resultant refuge is the Dharma. The resultant refuge is the Dharma in our own mind streams, right? This is what we're achieving. It's what we accomplish is this resultant Dharma. It's the transformation in our mind streams once we've perfected the qualities of realizing emptiness, abandoning samsaric pleasures, and the mental afflictions, just as the Buddhas have done. So that sounds like kind of a tall order, but these are things that, as we'll talk about more today, these are things that we can do, that we have started doing, and that we need to continue doing, like right now. How does the Buddha protect us, more specifically, right? So Khensa Rinpoche says that we need to rely on the Buddha, just as a small child relies on his or her mother, thinking of her all the time, day and night, every moment of the day. A small child always remembers, mom, either consciously or unconsciously. But likewise, whenever, especially when we're a little bit frightened, we need to be comforted, then our thoughts should immediately turn to the Buddha, the Dharma, right? The Buddha Dharma. And immediately, call with great certainty, great conviction that they hear our prayers, right? Think that they're there with you. Right. So the point is, it'd be pointless to just talk about suffering, right? It's to just look at the sufferings of samsara, and we do that all the time, whether it's specifically in a Dharma context or just thinking, in general about the sufferings of our lives, right? It'd be pointless to just think about that if there was no escape, right? So the first two truths, the truth of suffering and the truth of cessation of suffering, the origins of suffering, the truth of suffering and the origins of suffering, have been presented from the viewpoint of somebody who is trapped in samsara, right? What is suffering and what are the origins of suffering? Those are the two first noble truths. So then the third truth, which is the truth of cessation, and the fourth truth, which is the truth of the path. These are presented more like from the perspective of like a prisoner, right? Of a prisoner who is breaking out of the jail of samsara for good, right? Liberation. So the third truth, the truth of cessation, explains why we can end samsaric suffering. And we've talked about how the negative emotions, how ignorance are like stains, temporary stains on a piece of cloth. They're not woven into, the fabric itself with some, good spot remover, and a lot of effort over a sustained amount of time, long amount of time, they can eventually be washed away. So with respect to with respect to the selflessness of the I, right? Me, myself, I. We've looked into how our very identity, our persona, is inseparably related to our bodies, to our minds, right? And so it's through this careful meditation on emptiness that we can generate the realizations and the cessations that will free us from samsara. So to explore this question of what is the I, right, in a little greater detail, I have a quote from His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and he says, "The question remains, what is the I? We're not searching for the conventional, ordinary, normal self, but are trying to pinpoint exactly what is the inherent referent of the term I, right? So the aggregates are the basis of designation of the person, and the person or the I is the designated object. So when we search to find out exactly what is the I, it's to isolate and identify it as an objective entity with its own independent nature. Right? So we're looking for this, I, quote unquote, I. And where do we find it? How does it exist? Right? That's what we're trying to do. So after we've investigated everything, we've looked at the body, the feelings, discrimination, miscellaneous factors, and consciousness, bringing all these together, the collection of the aggregates, or is the I something different from the aggregates? We still can't find this independent, inherently existing I, right? So hopefully in the last class, we talked about, the mind and mental factors, and hopefully that helps lay the basis for understanding, this type of wisdom analysis, right? So the point is that, on the basis of the body, the mind, and its components, then we have this false sense of an I, false in the sense that it seems to exist independent of causes and conditions. So likewise, all phenomena lack inherent existence, and that is to say they exist always in dependence, in relation to something else. And this is a really important point, right? So in terms of ourselves, we can think of ourselves as parents only if we have children. We're married only if we have a spouse. Friends and enemies exist in relation to how we conceive of certain people. So someone who might consider, kind of a jerk can be somebody else's, treasured soulmate. So the sense of an other arises in relation to our sense of self. Right? So there can't be an other without a sense of, self. So I draw a circle around, what's me, what's mine. And this perimeter implies that everything outside must be other, right? So everything is dependently related, right? So in comparison to the pinky finger, right? Then the ring finger is going to be tall, but in comparison to the middle finger, then the ring finger now is short. So that's one way of thinking about dependent arising in terms of relational relationships, relative relationships. Okay. So looking at this, in more detail, at the most subtle level of analysis, phenomena exist in dependence on the mind, right? On conceptual thought processes, or sometimes, it's called labeling. So what does that mean? So, you think of how our sense faculties, our eyes, our ears, our nose, our tongue, our taste, physical sensations, our sense faculties kind of like roll out the red carpet for the whole world, right? This is the way we interact with the world. We create the world. We roll out the red carpet, we invite it to come in, right? Come here. It's all like our guest. The world's our guest. So based on the initial direct sense perception of an object, whether it's visual consciousness, I'm seeing the snow outside, the mental consciousness, right? The mental consciousness will analyze that information and compare it to pre-existing categories, concepts that we have up here in our minds, right? That encyclopedia. And that's how we identify things and discriminate, and determine what we're looking at. So this process, is most noticeable when we encounter something like unfamiliar, right? Something new. When that happens, you can really feel your mind slow down and be like, whoa, wait a minute, what is this? How does it fit into what I already understand? I already know. Is it this? Is it that? It kind of sorts through all the different categories. And you relate it to yourself, to your own experience, and a very, primal or primitive way of thinking, your first thought is, oh, is this thing a threat? Or is it, something wonderful, something delicious? And so we're doing this, with every moment of mind all the time. This is the way we're thinking, right? The interaction with sense consciousness and mind, and the mind consciousness all coming together in this very, very complex set of relations. Okay. So in the last session, we talked about the mind and its relationship to mental factors being different aspects of the mind, each serving a particular function or role. And we talked about, kind of named them very quickly as being feeling, discrimination, contact, attention, intention, mindfulness, and then there's a whole bunch of other ones, right? So this is a useful paradigm for understanding how we interpret and construct the world around us. So, watching the mind can be done through identifying the interplay of these various minds and mental factors, right? So this is one way of, looking at our minds. So, to give a simple example, right? At any time you can ask yourself what's capturing your attention. So, it could be, let's say you're sitting here and you're sitting in your room and you smell coffee being brewed in the kitchen, right? So you think, maybe if you like coffee, then a feeling of happiness, arises, and you think, ooh, coffee, 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 I need coffee, right? So the desire then arises and you think, I should get up and get a cup of coffee, along with maybe thoughts like who made the coffee, what kind of coffee, blah, blah, blah. So then, you can watch your attention. Attention then, focuses on the object, which is coffee, right? You're focusing on the smell of the coffee, let's say. And then, intention kicks in and you think, okay, now I'm going to get up and I'm going to go get that cup of coffee. But then, maybe your attention gets distracted because you get a notification on your phone, right? It goes bing. And then, you completely forget about the coffee. So this, type of analysis, which watching the changes in the mind, watching the changes in the body, this lies at, the core of what we call mindfulness meditation, right? So it's not just, sometimes we say mindfulness meditation, and you think, oh, focus on the breath, right? So it's not just, focusing on the breath and not watching your thoughts or watching anything else, right? That's kind of, it's a lot more, right? It's really breaking down every moment by moment, changes in the body, changes in the mind. And I think what's interesting is that, as we pay close attention to our minds, we notice how much time is spent just on autopilot, right? Processes such as eating, we do it, really just out of habit. So the other night, I was eating a plate of pasta last night, and it was amazing. Like I was watching my fork, like the fork just darted around, and it was picking up pieces of pasta and bringing them up to my mouth. And then it would zoom around and get a bite of bread, a sip of water. And in the meantime, we could consciously be doing something completely different, like, reading a book or watching a YouTube video. So all that is going on, right? All that very complex mental processing is going on. So many causes and conditions coming together, right? For things to happen, consciously, unconsciously, blah, blah, blah. It's really complicated. But yet, due to our ignorance of how things exist, we see ourselves, we see our phenomena, we think of them as standing alone, as being permanent, right? Or meaning unchanging, thinking that things as being independent of causes and conditions, right? So in this sense, ignorance is taken to mean like misconception, not knowing, or lacking reason. So to take this, argument in a slightly different direction, we know that we crave stability, we crave certainty. We need to feel like we're in control of, our lives. When we get anxious, oftentimes we respond by making plans, right? It feels good to do something, to feel like we can take action, even if we don't have enough information or clarity of mind to make sound judgments. Just doing something feels better than not doing anything at all. But since everything, as we've been talking about, is always changing, we're definitely not in control, of even simple decisions or situations. There's always just so many different factors in play. So sometimes the best thing we can do is just to recognize that this is the case, right? To kind of back off, take a step back, to be flexible, and to remind ourselves that we need to be able to adapt to change. That's kind of what I think resilience comes down to, is being flexible, being willing to be open-minded and accepting of changes. So, as we all know, the final outcome of any thing that we try to do may end up being very, very different from our original plans. We also have a habit of, beating ourselves up over the past. And so there was an article in the New York Times that talks about, how to cope with change when everything keeps changing. This came out, I think, in the beginning of COVID, in 2020. And so the article quotes a lady, Margie Worrell, who's the author of "You've Got This: The Life-Changing Power of Trusting Yourself." And she said that instead of getting stuck in a thought loop of like what could have been, right? I do this all the time. She recommends that we kind of zoom up, right? So like holding the situation at an arm's length and look at what's going on around us through a larger lens, right? Not getting stuck in the details down there. And specifically in terms of, coping with disappointment from a change, from not, being able to accomplish something that we hoped to. She said that we need to ask ourselves, was it really realistic that your plan should have fallen into place just as you wanted? She says, I've learned that what is outside our control is teaching us a lesson on letting go of our attachment to how we think things should be. And I think that's, a really good point, because, when you think about the way our minds become attached to our plans, plans that seem like, well, I'll leave it at that. So, yeah, I think that what I've mentioned just now, this is all, kind of very specific examples of how our minds work, of how our minds are duped by ignorance, right? Thinking that we have control over things that are actually constantly in change and is in flux, right? So let's look at this, look at the opposite, right? So the opposite of ignorance then is the wisdom realizing emptiness. So whereas the mind of ignorance, as we can tell, it's very narrowly constrained, it's contaminated by negative emotions such as anger and desire. The mind imbued with wisdom is completely the opposite, right? It's infinite like space. So in the Mahayana Sanskrit tradition, wisdom alone is not enough to attain Buddhahood, though, right? So we need two things. We need the wisdom, understanding, realizing emptiness, as well as compassion, right? So the wisdom aspect of the path and the method aspect of the path, we need them, both of them. So our motivation must be purely altruistic. We renounce samsara out of the compassion to end the suffering of all beings, including ourselves. All right, so that was a very long-winded recap of the last couple of sessions and the third noble truth. So the remainder of today's session focuses on the last of the four truths, which is the truth of the path, right? Which centers around three trainings: ethical conduct, single-pointed concentration, yoshine, and wisdom, right? So those are the three: ethical conduct, concentration, and wisdom. You'll hear those over and over again. So the bottom line is these are trainings that we can practice right now, not in some future life. These are things that we need to get started on or continue to practice right now. And we'll see how these practices are perfected by bodhisattvas, right? Bodhisattvas are spiritual practitioners who strive to generate, or have generated, the mind of enlightenment. Mind of enlightenment is known as bodhicitta. So you may have heard the term bodhicitta before, where bodhi means awakened and chitta means mind. So it's an awakened mind. It's the mind of enlightenment. In Tibetan, bodhicitta is translated as jang trup, where jang means that all mental obscurations have been completely eliminated, purified. So we end up, the mind is completely able to directly perceive all phenomena. And trup means enhancing our good qualities. So the word for Buddha in Tibetan is Sangye, where Sang means, very similar, right? Sang means to eliminate all the negativities, and Ge means to expand the sense of knowing all phenomena and actualizing all excellent qualities. So that's what a Buddha is, someone who has eliminated all negativities and actualized all excellent qualities. So when we say, we're striving to attain enlightenment, right, or the path to enlightenment, it makes it sound as though enlightenment is a place, but as you can tell from the definition here, it's not a place, it's a state of mind, right? It's a state of mind known as bodhicitta. And at its center lies the sincere wish to free all beings from the sufferings of samsara. That's the definition of compassion. So spiritual practitioners of both the Pali and the Sanskrit traditions give rise to one of the main meditations for transforming, the mind is meditating on love, compassion, empathetic joy, and equanimity. These are known as the four immeasurables. So currently, our minds are so limited, or they're so narrow, right? We can only think of ourselves. There's over 7 billion, people in the world, right? And many more animals and insects. And yet we're biologically hardwired to basically only think of a single individual, me. So by extension, to the me, there's also my family, my clan, my tribe, or to update this, like my followers, my subscribers, my friends. But when we stop and think about it, there are like 7 billion people, 7 people living beings. Actually, so if you say living beings, it'd be even more, like countless living beings who want happiness, just like me. They want to be free from suffering, just like me, right? And so, in order to transform our minds, we need to think of several things. So the first is think that all sentient beings have been our mothers, or at least, think that all sentient beings have loved us, just like our mothers have loved us. And then secondly, we need to see how they are in samsara, trapped helplessly in samsara. It's as though they're being dragged downstream in a raging torrent, completely helpless. And based on that sense of closeness, of commonality, of wishing to find happiness, to be freed from suffering, based on that sense of a shared experience of samsara, then that gives rise spontaneously to love and compassion. So we really need to not turn away from, suffering, the suffering, not just of ourselves, but the suffering of others, because we use that, that's the leverage, that's the foundation for developing love and compassion, right? Suffering, our own personal suffering, can be used as a way of breaking down barriers that we may feel, between me and others, right? That barrier that ordinarily exists. It can give rise to empathy when we see, on a personal level, how others are also experiencing suffering. So, for example, I fell on a patch of ice a couple of weeks ago, and I broke my wrist, right? Before that, I'd never broken any bone in my body. And so whenever I mention it to people, oh, I broke my wrist, they immediately replied that either, the same thing happened to them. They also fell 2 weeks ago on a Monday or whatever it was on the black ice, or that they know others, people who also have fallen, right? So, it's very sad to think that so many people have broken limbs, right? This is just a very small example, right? And to think that many people have experienced much, much, much worse, right? That I got off very, very easily. So this, for me, this has opened up, a door to empathize, with people. I used to work part-time at the animal shelter on a very limited basis, and now I can't do that, for the next 4 to 6 months, 4 to 6 weeks, right? So for me, that's not a financial hardship, but wow, I can really think how devastating it would be for somebody who can no longer work, just from due to a simple injury, right? Wow, that's just, terrible. That's life-changing. So let's take a pause here. Let's try to think of, our own experiences of what our own experience brings to the cultivation and deepening of our love and compassion, right? So I'm sure many of you have practiced this prayer, 4 immeasurables, but I thought we would go through this together, verse by verse. And this really is the heart of, loving kindness or metta meditation. So let me see if I can do a screen share. And here we go, share screen. Share. Look at that. Whoa, I'm getting pretty good at this. I don't know how to make everybody's face go away, but hopefully you can see this. Oop, there we go. All right, people, go away. Minimize. All right, there we go. Can everybody see that?
Yep.
Thank you. All right. So before we start, just notice as we go through this, that each verse has a wish, right? An aspiration. So the wish is the first sentence. The second is the aspiration. The third is the resolution, right? And the fourth is the request for inspiration. I think that's very nice as we go through this. Okay. So the first.
I'm sorry, Anna, can you say that one more time? What you just said?
Yeah. So each verse has the same structure. And the first sentence then expresses a wish. The second sentence expresses aspiration. The third is a resolution.
Inspiration.
And the last is the request for inspiration. Okay, so
Thanks.
hang on 1 second. I'm gonna have to let my dog out so she can go. Have her trapped in the bedroom, but she's expressing a wish to get a drink of water. Get your water. Stay here now. Go to sleep. Yeah. All right. How wonderful it would be if all sentient beings were to abide in equanimity, free from the discriminating thoughts of anger and attachment that hold some close and others distant. May they abide in equanimity. I myself will cause them to abide in equanimity. Please, Guru Buddha, bless me to be able to do so. And I should also mention, sorry for the interruption, that as we go through this, right, and when you do this on your own, right, you have to really focus on a specific individual for each of these verses, right? So equanimity, the second one is love. The next one is compassion. The next one is joy, right? Here's the last one. Did I lose one? 1, 2. Oh no, okay, right. Last one is joy, right? So sometimes the order is presented differently. Sometimes you'll see equanimity as the last verse. So for this meditation to be effective, this is my pro tip, right? You really have to work on it with a specific individual in mind for it to be effective. Because otherwise it's just like a lot of words. So that's the whole point, is to really be able to, when you're meeting people, when you're interacting with them, because you practice this meditation over and over again, you don't have to like go up and give people bear hugs. Be like, oh, I absolutely love you. But from the depths of your heart now, you're open to them, you're feeling, relating to them in a different way because of this work that you've done in terms of generating a true sense of wanting them to be free from suffering, a true sense of empathy for where they're coming from, etc. Very, very important.
Tendrol, can you put this prayer somewhere?
Yeah, I can. Maybe if I'm really high tech, I can maybe put it in the chat, but I'm not sure. Otherwise, I will email it to people. All right, so the second verse is, how wonderful it would be if all sentient beings had happiness and its causes. This is love. May they have happiness and its causes. I myself will cause them to have happiness and its causes. Please, Guru Buddha, bless me to be able to do so. How wonderful it would be if all sentient beings were free from suffering and its causes. May they be free from suffering and its causes. I myself will cause them to be free from suffering and its causes. Please, Guru Buddha, bless me to be able to do so. How wonderful it would be if all sentient beings were never separated from the happiness of higher rebirth and liberation. May they never be separated from these. I myself will cause them never to be separated from these. Please, Guru Buddha, bless me to be able to do so. So also, the very first one, the cultivation of equanimity here, right? So that means seeing all beings as equally deserving of one's attention and of our love, of our compassion, of our joy. So that means that in order to be able to do this, we have to be, we have to stop being partial. Partial meaning, we favor some people and other people we just don't care about. So that's really a crucial starting point. So this is what allows us to bring our deep-seated compassion to life. And this is the foundation for bodhicitta, right? So if we're doing this practice and we're only thinking of our friends and family, then we're not really doing the practice. Okay. So, and then another thing a question that comes up very often, the goal is not to try to even out our love. It's not to try to hold, the friend, the stranger, or somebody who we are indifferent to right now, and the person who we feel hostile to. We're not like trying to make everybody equal in the sense that we're all indifferent to all of them, right? Because it might seem as though that's what we're trying to do, that we're just trying to, not tone down our anger, and then at the other extreme, tone down our attachment so that we hold everybody like equally in almost like in a, uncaring way, right? But rather, what we're trying to do is develop a sense of loving compassion, just as, we talked about earlier, how a mother, thinks of her only child. That's the kind of love that we're trying to generate for each of these, right? Not a sticky, clinging attachment type of love, but a deep-seated feeling of caring and wanting to end suffering, right? For each of those three, right? So for the person to whom we feel hostile to, and this person in the indifferent category right now, right? So we're trying to hold them, with the same love and compassion. And then with the person who, friends and family, right? Then, we're trying to hold them in a realistic, sustainable sense of love and compassion. Okay. So that's something that can be confusing. So I thought I would mention that. All right, so I apologize for going through that kind of quickly, but I'm trying to finish here. Okay, so the main obstacle to love, right, is anger. So I thought we would just look at that for a minute. So very often, resentment, jealousy, pride, and other strong emotions are mixed in, kind of like in a big witch's brew, with anger. So fortunately, there are many techniques for coping with anger in a difficult situation, ranging from simply counting to 10, taking, some deep breaths, or walking away. But really, it's important to take the time to figure out why you're angry. And usually it boils down to, the same old culprit, ego, or me, myself, and I. Right? If we're really honest, there's usually a sense of me, myself, and I in there. Okay. So to give an example, and I think I've used this example before in other classes, but just really quickly, the other day I was, actually this happened in the summer. I was cleaning up an outdoor area and I accidentally disturbed a wasp nest, and I got stung up and down my arms. And, I was thinking, well, I can't really be angry with the wasps because they're just doing their own thing, right? I disturbed their nest. So of course they would want to attack me. And it was just pure self-defense, right? So, if I were to be angry with the wasps, where would I be angry where would I direct my anger at? You know, and so, you know, should I be angry at, and this is actually in Shantideva, you know, it's one of the analyses, I think probably in the chapter on patience, or where he talks about, would I be angry? Should I be angry at, you know, like which part of the wasp? Is it the stinger? Is it the venom? Is it the whole wasp? Or should I be angry, you know, with my own hand, my arm, or the fact that I was in there messing around with their nest accidentally? So you can see that there are many different causes and conditions coming together to create the situation. And that, you know, there's no point in blaming the wasp when, you know, I had a part, I played an important role in the situation. So how can I get angry, you know, at the wasp? If anything, I should be angry at myself for, you know, disturbing their nest. Because I feel bad for them. But anyway, so the point is that we need to be able to recognize our anger while it's still in its infancy. Okay, so, you know, the minute I saw what had happened, I tried to stop and say, oh, you know, there's no point in getting angry at this. So using reason and analysis, you know, like, whoa, okay, there's no point in getting angry. So again, it comes back to the idea of mindfulness, right? Of always patrolling our minds to see what's going on, catching negative emotions before they flare up. So there are many very detailed explanations in the teachings on the disadvantages of anger and the importance of practicing patience. And so in the interest of saving time, I'm not going to go into that now. You can look those up. But again, that's one of the questions that comes up, you know, over and over again. Like, you know, I'm trying to be so patient, but everybody else is pissing me off. Like, you got to go back and really reflect on the disadvantages of anger. Okay, and then to remind ourselves that the best opportunity to learn is from, you know, somebody who we feel hostile to, right? From our enemy, quote unquote enemy. The best enemy is, you know, our teacher, right? So if we can develop the correct attitude, an unmistaken way of thinking about an enemy, then essentially the enemy disappears, right? Our mind can then become closer and closer to the mind of bodhicitta, right? So if you slay, you know, one enemy, right, out of anger, you kill one enemy. If you continue to hold that same type of mind, then, you know, it's no surprise that another enemy will arise, and then another, right? Another way of thinking about a difficult relationship, let's say, you know, somebody takes advantage of, you know, you, or makes you look foolish or whatever. If we're able to remain, you know, tolerant and humble and just, you know, maybe walk away from the situation without getting defensive, without jumping in, right? Then, you know, we can think that with a sense of compassion, right? A sense of caring that, you know, in the long run, this person is going to suffer the consequences of his or her negative, you know, behavior, right? So even in the short term, you know, the enemy might seem to have won the situation, so to speak, right? In the long term, you know, if their intention was to cause harm, then the negative consequences, the negative karma, those imprints will carry forward. Okay. So, you know, without anger, how do we respond then in those difficult situations? So, you know, without anger, but instead from a deep-seated compassion, then we can take strong action in a way that is, you know, that is wise, right? That is for, you know, the benefit
can I ask you a super quick question about karma? So like if somebody, does something in this lifetime to potentially cause harm, let's say they steal yeah, we'll go with that. Let's say they steal a lot of money. In future lifetimes, if causes and conditions are right and that karma is going to ripen, is it like related to the original offense, or it could?
Absolutely.
Oh, okay. Because I was wondering if it's just the level of intensity of suffering, or if it's something that's like related to the action.
Actually, it's both, right? So
Okay.
each of the different non-virtuous actions has a corresponding and karmic result, and they're all very clearly explained in the teachings. But I think the example of stealing is that it results in poverty, a difficulty in finding resources in the next life, and also can be related to, I think, the actual where you're reborn, right? So there's like an environmental result, which I think might be a hungry ghost, where you are unable to obtain resources. And in terms of the heaviness of the karma, so to speak, so if you steal from a monastery, or you steal from a monk or a nun or whatever, yeah, and then of course the weight of the karma is going to be heavier than if you don't.
Gotcha.
So yeah, it's amazing how detailed the presentation of karma is.
Yes. Look further into that.
Yeah, it's fascinating, just fascinating. Okay, so close. Okay, I wanted to leave more time for questions because I know in the last few classes I just blabbed on and on. There's no time. So in terms of improving our, so another way of preventing anger from arising, or a way for coping with situations that center around disagreements, right? Then, as we all know, can you mute yourself? Wait, hang on. Make sure you're muted, please. I think that's who is that? Hang on. Okay. So poor communication is very often the source of anger, right? So email, texting, all of those, because they're short and brief, they can very easily be misunderstood, right? So there are many different techniques for improving communication skills. One of them, for example, is nonviolent communication. So there's a whole Center for Nonviolent Communication that offers classes in deep listening. And so their mission statement says, with nonviolent communication, we learn to hear our own deeper needs and those of others. Through its emphasis on deep listening to ourselves as well as others, nonviolent communication helps us discover the depth of our own compassion. This language reveals the awareness that all human beings are only trying to honor universal values and needs every minute, every day. So I took a couple of their classes, and I found them very helpful, especially when they do the one-on-one exercises, where you really practice using, certain ways of not parroting back, but reflecting back, what somebody said, trying to really make sure you understand what they're saying before you jump to conclusions and respond the way I normally do. So to give a personal example, so my mother often, voices her criticism of the choices that I've made in my life, right? And she's in her 90s, and when you're in your 90s, you tend to repeat yourself. So I hear this quite a lot. And I acknowledge the pain that this causes me. I don't try to brush it away and pretend, like she didn't say it or that it doesn't hurt me, right? So I acknowledge the pain that it causes me. And at one level, I'm very sorry that I didn't meet her expectations, right? But, at the same time, when I try to think of this, what she's expressing, from her perspective, I know her motivation is only, because she wants the best for me, right? And so she wanted my life to be much, much easier, right? Or she still does, even though I'm like 59 years old, she's still so worried about me. And, after all, when you think about it, what does every good Chinese mother want for her child, right? They always want their kids to become doctors, just like my dad. So when I didn't become a doctor, like it was all downhill from there. So anyway, whenever she brings up the past, I just try to sit quietly and to listen to what she's saying. I don't try to, justify what happened or the choices that I made, because, it's pointless, right? It's only going to stir up emotions, and memories. And anyway, the point is, right, the past can't be changed, right? It's over, right? I tried to go to medical school, but that wasn't happening. So instead, I use this opportunity to just focus on her love, on her concern, and to treasure our time together. So that's what I learned from NBC. So just to wrap up here, so what are some of the I'm gonna shorten this a little. There are many inconceivable benefits of generating bodhicitta, right? So it involves, turning away from anger, right? Generating a sense of love, equal love and compassion for all living beings, right? Not just human beings, for all living beings, working on that sense of equanimity. That's like step one, right? Understanding compassion, suffering, looking suffering directly in the eye so that we can develop renunciation, right? All of this comes together, right? And so by cultivating the mind of enlightenment, bodhicitta, for yourself, for others, then this brings new meaning, to this present life, and it sets the tone for future lives. Being aware of the benefits of bodhicitta will then inspire us to make an effort to cultivate it. By holding others dearer than ourselves, we treat them gently, we treat them, calmly and with respect. When we're skillful in our communication, relationships become more peaceful. It's very difficult to get angry with somebody when they're looking at you, holding you with love and compassion. Okay. So when our minds are filled with the four immeasurables, then likewise, their health benefits, right? You can tell that your blood pressure drops, your breath becomes more even, your overall health is going to improve. So that's certainly a benefit. The clouds of depression are more likely to dissipate. When we fall ill or we encounter, other difficulties, keeping this bodhicitta intention in mind, we are able to remain undisturbed. We're able to, again, keep things in perspective, right? I'm just one person. There are countless other living beings. And at the time of death, we can pass away peacefully with no regrets, right? Knowing that bodhicitta has given our lives, meaning, and will continue to do so. So somebody who's generated bodhicitta is known as a bodhisattva, right? And there are different degrees of bodhicitta. There's aspiring bodhicitta as well as engaged bodhicitta. So what's important to note then is a bodhisattva is somebody, an ordinary person, just like, you or me, right? But it's somebody who has generated this wish for enlightenment and has taken a vow, right? So there's a bodhisattva vow that you can take to work for the benefit of all sentient beings. Okay? So it's a vow. And again, the point is, you don't pick and choose who you hold with your love and compassion, right? It's somebody who's a bodhisattva holds all beings equally. And the vow, the bodhisattva vow, is lost the minute that, we turn away from somebody thinking that, oh, that person's just too challenging, right? I'll never be able to really help that person because you just drives me crazy. The minute you do that, right? Whoops. And then you've lost the vow. Okay. So what do bodhisattvas do? So again, some of you may know this already from studying Shantideva, but a good review. Bodhisattvas engage basically in 6 deeds that include all of the virtuous practices. So the first is generosity, right? Generosity is giving away all of our possessions. And by doing so, we overcome our greedy attachment, right? So again, we can do this right now. So these are primarily, mental exercises, right? So that's the beauty of it, so to speak, right? So generosity, you can think as you're eating food, before you eat, think that you're offering the food to all of the organisms in your body. Think that you're offering the most delicious, tasty food. Even if you're just eating like a junky Pop-Tart, you can transform it into the most beautiful, wonderful, nectar and offer it to all living beings, right? First, you offer it, of course, to the Buddhas, right? Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, you make an offering to your spiritual teachers. And then, think that, wow, I wish that all sentient beings could likewise, enjoy strawberry frosted Pop-Tarts. So, again, through your mind, you practice giving away everything in your home, your body, from your body to your house, to your dog, to whatever, right? Just practice giving it all away, giving anybody who needs something exactly what they desire. And the second is ethical discipline. So that means, non-harming others by practicing restraints. So restraining harmful actions of body, speech, and mind. And so being generous, right? Not being stingy, right? Overcoming stinginess and instead being generous. That's a form of not harming, I would say. Patience, right? Being patient instead of getting upset and angry at the suffering that somebody causes you, right? Instead, being patient and not giving up on those who harm us. Right? Perseverance, joyous perseverance is the next one, and that's to increase our virtuous activities by joyfully persevering, by engaging in virtuous acts such as generosity, such as helping somebody who's stuck on the side of the road, shoveling somebody's driveway, whatever it is, right? Joyously persevering in a virtuous action with intense and long-term enthusiasm, right? So not just doing it in the short term or like for 5 minutes. Instead, joyous perseverance means for this life, next life, countless lifetimes. But again, this is something that we can start doing right now. And then meditative stabilization, right? That's clearing away negative states of mind, clearing away the afflictions, through concentration. That's our meditation practice, training our minds to be watchful and vigilant. And finally, the wisdom practice. So understanding the concepts associated with, understanding emptiness, right? setting the stage for slowly, we're slowly clearing away all of the cognitive obscurations, clearing away, all of the mental, the negative emotions. Primarily here, we're talking about the cognitive or the knowledge obscurations. Okay, so we're studying Shanti Deva's A Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life with Geshe Darge, then you have covered each of these. There's a chapter on each of these in that text, and are well on your way. So these are the joy practices, right? They're the way in which we accumulate merit, right? This is the way we can, transform our life, making it meaningful by guarding, our minds, guarding our associated acts of body and speech, being able to break through our self-cherishing habits and instead focusing our efforts, making efforts. Our joyous perseverance then becomes one of helping others. So these are the joy practices that make our life meaningful. It's the foundation, or it really is, in the sense, when we talk about social justice, right? What does that really mean? It's all of this, right? It's focusing on others, for others' welfare. So really, it's any endeavor that to help others and to be able to promote peace and harmony, from at the micro level, all the way up through building better societies, peaceful nations. It has to start somewhere, and it starts really at the level of the individual. Okay, so to conclude, I think that we all realize that it's extremely rare to come into contact with the Buddha's teachings, right? Even with the internet, it's extremely rare to come into contact with the Dharma, right? And even if we've heard about the Dharma, that to really genuinely have interest in studying the Dharma and practicing the Dharma, that's even more limited, right? And so we think that Buddhism actually kind of vanished in India, over the course of time, even though at one point it was that was the stronghold, right? That's where it originated, right? As historical forces changed, as circumstances changed, then Buddhism kind of vanished, right? And likewise, in Tibet right now, due to China's, the Chinese government's relentless persecution of the Tibetans and the attack on their culture and Buddhism in particular, it's going extinct. So on the other hand, now in the West, as Buddhism has really taken hold of people's interest, and it's thankfully, and I think in a very excited way, in a wonderful way, it's now kind of morphed into this secular approach, universal compassion, right? And it's now very wide. It's now spreading through the education system, in workplaces, in psychotherapy practices, and neurosciences, etc. So that's, I think, a very positive and wonderful contribution. So, as individuals, we have an incredible opportunity to listen, to reflect, to meditate on the teachings in order to find true happiness for ourselves and for others. And I think the best advice, really, when it comes down to is persevere, right? Joyous perseverance means never give up, right? And so we need to continue to improve our understanding and to apply what we've learned to our minds. So the Dalai Lama, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, offered these words of encouragement at a teaching in the 1980s in London, a long time ago. This is from one of his teachings. Because, and I'm just mentioning this because, you know, for some of you old timers who've been studying this for a while, you know, I think on the one hand, you know, we should look back and see, you know, what have there been improvements in the way in our lives, and not to set expectations, you know, too high. So that's what he's addressing in these words of encouragement. We need to be realistic in terms of the time required to generate bodhicitta. We should compare our behavior with our behavior of 5 or 10 years ago, and think in terms of life after life, even eons. If we only think in terms of days or weeks, then it's impossible to generate bodhicitta. We each have Buddha nature, so our effort absolutely comes from us. Everything depends on our own effort to change, to take the medicine the Buddha has given us. We have both Buddha nature and the methods for liberation. Okay, so we have about 15 minutes left. So if you have any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself or put questions in the chat.
I have a question. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, so and I'm kind of merging 3 questions. I apologize. One is, you mentioned sources, and I think you're talking obviously about the Bodhisattva's Way of Life by Shantideva. But the sources for, I don't know, we used to call them antidotes, or the methods of dealing with any of what we used to call the afflictions. Here we're talking about anger. What are some other sources you would recommend? And I'm looking for like primary sources, not necessarily, you know, articles in magazines, but some of the maybe pre-Tibetan Buddhist sources, or the Tibetan Buddhist sources that you'd recommend. Secondly, I think you said, you know, we're not looking to suppress our anger, but I find that really an interesting problem. And I'm looking for how that's addressed in these sources, because quite often we're angry for a very valid reason. And if we try to just overcome the anger, we're not addressing. And you said, well, it's important to address the cause of the anger. I'm just wondering, you know, a little more on that, because it's very easy, I find, to suppress anger, which leads to depression and erupting in worse anger later. Okay, so I'm going to leave it at that.
Okay, so so it's a question about sources. So both in Shantideva as well as, you know, in the Lamrim Chenmo, because I know you're studying the text with Geshe and Geshe, right? There are extensive presentations on anger and the disadvantages of anger, right? So I can go through and try to be more specific. I can find a specific reference if that's helpful.
No, that's fine. Lamrim Chenmo, yes, but are there other, like before that? And also, like in Lamrim Chenmo, they talk about the result in next life, the result when you do finally make it to a human life, how you're going to have a predisposition for this and that. And some of us find the human life metaphor a little of a stretch, but a good metaphor for this life as well. So maybe you want to.
What do you mean by that? I'm not sure I understand the point that you're making. The metaphor?
Some of us find the future and past life truth difficult, because we haven't witnessed it ourselves, but we can still say, yes, it does represent a metaphor we can use for this life. In my future life, as in next week, or when I become 20 years older, or when I retire, or something like that, you know?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Right. No, I mean, I think that could be useful. Sure. Thinking of future life, meaning the future in this life, and by extrapolation, maybe, you know, as you become more comfortable with the idea of future rebirths, then I'm thinking of it in that sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And in Lamrim Chenmo, they say, okay, well, your next life, you might be a hell being because of your anger.
Right.
And the life after that, you might be a human being. And you mentioned the environment might be one in which it's scarce resources. You're surrounded by other people who have propensities to anger, other people who are stealing, or whatever. I guess that's more if you were stealing. But and then they say, yeah, and you're going to have a predisposition to already have an angry disposition because you've trained in that in this life.
Right.
I found that interesting. But I guess my question more is, what are the sources before Tibetan that we should look at this, and how can we look at it from the sources, not from modern people's interpretation of it using modern psychology, but from the sources? How can we look at how not to suppress our anger, but how to, as you said, love our enemy and realize this is coming from us? Your description of the wasp's nest or a bee's nest when you hit it was really interesting. I suppose. But how do we do that? Where is that in the original Dharma? That's what I'm finding interesting.
So one of the quotes that the Dalai Lama provides in his book by Venerable Thupten Chodron and His Holiness the Dalai Lama, they put together, this whole series. And hang on one second. This is a really fantastic series. It's called Library of Wisdom and Compassion. It's got 6 volumes, each one devoted to a particular topic. There's one book which is called, volume 5 is In Praise of Great Compassion, where he goes through the disadvantages of anger, and he quotes a sutra, the Sutra on the Wretchedness of Anger, that specifies, 7 disadvantages of anger. And so, we could go through each of these, but really, I think what it comes down to again is that sense of self, right? And so, if we're angry, we might think that, our anger is valid, is justified. But again, we have to do that hard work of examining our role in the situation, and then not, like you said, definitely don't just suppress the anger, right? But by looking at it in detail, figuring out, what happened in the situation, then hopefully, that liberates us, from the anger. And so then it goes away, right?
Can I offer a suggestion to Richard's question about finding pre-Tibetan sources, not contemporary source interpretations, and even pre-Tibetan sources? So there is the you can find it in like Pali literature, like Bhikkhu Bodhi editing the middle length discourses of the Buddha. That's actually what the Buddha actually said. Then you got the sutras like the flower ornament scripture, which is the translation of the Avatamsala Sutra. These are the actual the Buddha talking. So the middle discourses, the Avatamsala Sutra, the connected discourses of the Buddha. Then you can look at the path of purification text of the Buddha about ways of purifying yourself, which I'm sure talks about anger. So in other words, if you go to the discourses of the Buddha, which is what actually the Buddha said, and that's a huge many texts. You can look under Bhikkhu Bodhi, you'll see many original texts of actually what the Buddha said. So that's I think
that's an excellent point. Yeah.
Pre-Tibetan sources.
Yeah. Do we answer your questions?
Yeah, I've looked at the what is it called? The Madhyamaka Nikaya, the middle length discourses at length. And I'm really not finding it handled as well as in Wheel of Sharp Weapons, or I think, it's handled very well in Bodhisattva Charyavatara, but I'm not finding it really handled well that I have found. And I guess I like what Ronnie suggested. Flower ornament, definitely. That will be a great one to look at.
Yeah, it's over 1,000 pages.
Yeah. But thank you very much, both of you. Thank you so much.
Okay, and then my plug for Robert Thurman. Thurman's, reading the Avatamsaka Sutra Saturday nights. He's on, I don't know what page he's on, but it's available through Tibet House, through Menla Online, Saturday nights. It's just brilliant. His commentary is very helpful, and then he, actually reads through the source text.
Oh, thank you very much. That's awesome.
Okay. And in fact, I didn't get around to putting together the full bibliography for this class, going back to the beginning. But if anyone's interested, I'll put my email down in the chat box. If there's anything that you're interested in, I'd be happy to send that out. Okay, so I see a long Tendrol 108 at That's me. Okay, in regards to anger, how can we overcome issues of anger being addressed to us, but not at us? To us, but not at us, such as dealing with family arguments where there will unfortunately be someone who gets hurt, no matter what. And I'm the unbiased person, and they come to me to be, the specific example being moving an ill family member away from the rest in order to get them care the other feels is best. I often find myself listening to family being angry at one another and walking away is not, so kind of getting stuck in the middle, right? I want to listen and help, but no matter the outcome, someone will feel hurt, which goes against my teachers of causing harm to others. Right. Well, yeah. I think that is a difficult situation where we kind of end up being caught in the position of listening to two sides of an argument and not wanting to take sides, right? I'm just reading the question again, making sure I understand it. Someone along. No matter the outcome, someone will get hurt. Well, I mean, I guess you're trying not to be caught in the middle. At the same time, using, I think, by staying calm, right? There's a lot to be said for just being the calm presence in the room, right? By not trying to, jump in and make decisions or to take sides, right? By just staying calm, creating an environment where each, side has an opportunity to express, himself or herself, express their positions, right? Trying to use some of these, NVC communication skills, right? Of trying to slow down, right? And making sure that everybody's heard and that we clearly understand what everybody is bringing to the table. And of course, at some point there may still be just a difference of opinion, but, our role then, again, is not to inflame the situation, right? By just trying to facilitate, a good conversation, then hopefully that's gonna improve the situation. Certainly not make it, any worse. As to whether, somebody is going to, no matter the outcome, someone will feel hurt. Well, hopefully not, maybe in a specific situation, maybe, with a skillful facilitation of conversation, then maybe, we can come to, a good resolution where everybody's has to compromise a little bit, but hopefully the situation would be better than otherwise. Yeah, no, definitely not easy to be stuck in the middle. Very, very much not easy. Yeah.
Can I ask a question that I think is in line with that?
Sure.
I like the example also that you gave of your situation with your mother, where when she's criticizing, you just sort of listen, and in this example, somebody is stuck in the middle of conflict with, family. And so I understand the goal when, I think it's challenging. I'm not even sure if I know exactly how to navigate that all the time, but is to sort of not participate in that. But by not sort of trying to participate in maybe conflict resolution or, the probably impossible task of speaking with your mother about the issues that, you've got between each other, and just letting it go, doesn't that sort of also have a downside of preventing a deeper connection?
Preventing a deeper connection by
Yeah, by
staying out of
not,
by not
sorry.
having a conversation.
Yeah, and I know it's to me it's sort of a catch-22 because I know there's a lot of conversations that aren't going to be helpful.
Right.
But then by not having the conversation, I also feel, well, now I'm giving up hope of a deeper connection where had I attempted it, maybe there would be a, I have found that when conflict can be resolved in a
Right.
good way, it does, manifest in a really better connection.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's
No.
kind of
In the long run,
choosing,
I agree.
but choosing when to attempt that and when not to attempt that, and when you choose not to attempt that, I think in a sense, I feel sometimes like you're sort of giving up hope on a deeper connection, and and I guess
yeah, I think that's where the skill and the practice comes in. But I think, in the long run, yeah, the idea is to be able to come to a good resolution by listening, by taking the time to really understand what each person is where they're coming from, right? To take that time to explore their feelings, their to allow them the time to express what they mean, instead of just jumping to conclusions and maybe just saying, based on past habits, just saying, oh well, you're saying blah 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 because you know what I mean, like not just glossing over where
I understand that. I do understand it, and I do understand what you mean. I mean, I'm not saying I'm skilled necessarily, but I understand and I do attempt to do that. But I do find that not everybody is aware, and so at some point, I have to stop trying to even ask questions and trying to understand
Mhm.
and just to listen and then
Mhm.
move on. But then
Mhm.
sometimes that leaves me with a feeling of being disconnected and not having the ability to really get a good connection
Mhm.
without getting that beeswax, disturbed.
Right. Right. Or maybe that's something that, you do in a situation one-on-one, you go back and explore that relationship, you deepen the relationship, not in the context of that particular conflict, right?
Yes, I see. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Just a thought.
No, that's really helpful. Thank you.
Okay, so it's 11:36.
I just wanted to add something. Was that Phoebe? I think Phoebe's talking about something you were talking about earlier. It's like boundaries, but she's talking about something else. She's talking about sometimes we just vent and it's healthy. It's like the talking cure mentioned by Freud, or cathartic cleansing by expressing our anger to the person we're angry at. And I think Phoebe's really raising a good point that sometimes we connect deeply with people after we've had our anger explosion, if we're capable of doing this thing I think you're talking about, Annie, which is this loving that person through it, et cetera. And I think it's a huge topic. I just really love that it was brought up, and I hope you would talk more on that. I know you're in a hurry, so.
Well, so it'd be like a child having a temper tantrum, allowing them to just vent.
I have a similar question that touches this topic. Are there
Okay.
effective aspects to avoiding those or protecting ourselves from those that are hurtful? Do we really have the capacity to change any other human being unless that person or persons are open to change? As an example, could you alter the wasp from stinging you if you inadvertently interfered with its nest? What is it you can do to make a choice to protect yourself or to harm the wasp?
Okay.
It's all connected. It's not.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
multiple questions. Well, what if someone is not open to your loving interaction? If they're hurtful, mean people, and you embrace them with love and good positive feedback, and that just kind of inflames them just to be meaner and nastier and more hurtful because they feel that you're more vulnerable. You know, it's kind of like you were vulnerable when you touched the wasp nest.
Right.
Right? You didn't intend to kill a wasp. Okay, I don't know what actually happened. So you did get stung. But what if you had to protect yourself from being stung by, it was either you or the wasp, and you had to make that choice? And you know, it's kind of less complicated when you think about the wasp.
Right. Right.
We know that you're not going to ever, you know, influence the nature of the wasp to protect itself. But, you know, people are much more complex.
Absolutely.
And, you know, in that regard, if you have to protect yourself from somebody who has a wasp nature.
Sure. Sure. Well, I mean, I guess it comes down to a specific situation, right? So if somebody is physically and mentally abusive and you're in the relationship, then you know, of course, you need to be able to protect yourself, right? And especially for us, you know, we're aspiring to become, you know, bodhisattvas, but we're taking baby steps, right? Realistically, we can't bite off more than we can chew. And so, you know, if a situation becomes, you know, unbearable and you're in danger, then do whatever you can to distance yourself, you know, while still not giving up on the other person, right? While still keeping in mind that our enemy is our best teacher, because that's the only way we're going to be able to, you know, to flex our muscles, right? To develop our bodhicitta is if somebody attacks us, right? So while bearing that in mind, then
what if it's less extreme than when you're actually in danger, but you know that the other person is not receptive to your kindness or your will or your kind of intention to turn a situation around, you know, because somebody has to be open to accept your goodwill and your kindness. You know, the kind of give and take in life, somebody gives and somebody takes, and you want to give, but the person refuses your offering.
Right. Or, and then it could be, you know, a question of, you know, our own lack of skill, you know, maybe, or we don't have the karma there to be able to communicate, you know, with them in order to change a situation, right? I mean, a lot of people will say, "Oh, here I am. I'm practicing patience and loving kindness, and the other person is still always just so angry at me." Right? That happens a lot. You know, like I'm trying to be patient, but they're not listening. You know, they don't care. They just get even more angry. Right? I want to share, you know, what I've learned about the Dharma. I want to share, and even if it's not in that particular instance, that happens very, very often. Right? And so again, you know, it's just taking a step back. You know, being generous to ourselves, giving ourselves that space, you know. It'll take time, right? It's going to take time. And again, having the expectation, I think that we should be able to bring somebody around. Well, you know, maybe not. Maybe there just isn't that connection, right? I think that's possible.
You mean like maybe having a realistic expectation that there are only certain things that we have the capacity to change and others we cannot. So you develop a strategy for when you can make a change and when you can't make a change.
Right. And which isn't to say that the situation won't change in the future, but at this, you know, right now, maybe the situation's not right. You know, maybe next week or next year, you know, the relationship will change. Maybe some circumstance will change such that, all of a sudden the person is, you know, you're really willing more receptive, right? Or you know what I'm saying? Just because the situation isn't ripe now doesn't mean it won't be in the future. I guess that's what I'm saying.
Thank you for that perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. We can't help others. My question in the chat, we can't help others if we don't help ourselves as well. Yes, yes. Right, and we are helping ourselves by helping others, right? We are helping ourselves. I think that's what it comes down to, right? Seeing that this is the way, cherishing others, right, is the way to happiness. That's the best way to find happiness, is through cherishing others. It sounds counterintuitive, but that's kind of the Buddhist path. That's what the Buddha is teaching. And I mean, and it's not really counterintuitive, right? So if you smile, right? If you go into a meeting and you're full of, you're happy, your mind is, balanced, you're making an effort to greet people, in a welcoming manner, it's very, very different than if you come in and you're grouchy and you're tired and you just lay a whole bunch of garbage on people. It really changes the outcome of the meeting, right? If you interrupt people, like your idea is the best, and so you cut people off, and you don't let them finish their thoughts, right? Even those very seemingly trivial expressions of yourself, right, has a tremendous impact on everybody around us, right? Okay. Hang on one second. You want to go out again? Are you gonna go bury your bone? Okay, so I don't want to hold anyone up because we're way over time, but if you have other questions and you're interested in staying and talking, we can do that too.
Ani.
Hi, Louisa.
I just wanted to say thank you so much, and thank you to everybody in the class. The topic is so relevant. My mom's in hospice care, and the team has been wonderful. Her aides have been wonderful, but there've been a couple of really super crazy neighbors doing super crazy, not so great things, and you don't want to get angry, and so the topic was just so relevant. I just can't thank all of you enough. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Louisa. Best wishes for your mom.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right. Okay, well, I guess we'll end here. And again, you have my email address. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions or would like any of the resources. Okay, thank you so much for coming, and dedicate all of the merit from this series of classes to our efforts to improve our own minds, wrestling with our monkey minds, so that we may find peace in our own lives, and then to be able to share that with others as best we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Annie.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ani.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye, honey.